I want to tell you all about a man. This man's name is Gene Solomon. He's been a taxi driver in New York City since 1977. Now recently Gene was asked to share a couple of his favorite stories as a taxi driver, and that led to a book of memoirs of over 100 stories called Confessions of a Taxi Driver. And one of those stories goes as follows. One summer night in 1996, it's a typical night for Gene. He pulls up to a group of young adults who had hailed his cab and out enjoying the nightlife. He notices a blonde young man, and he's got a big cigar in his mouth, so I mean he sticks out. Now as they pile into the cab, into the taxi, this kid asks him, "Do you have any idea who I am?" And Gene says, no idea. So he introduces himself, says his name, and he says, "Have you ever heard that name before at all?" He says, "Doesn't ring a bell." So as they drive for a minute, and then this kid, he rattles off a bunch of movies. And Gene thinks about that, and he hasn't seen any of those. And so when he asks if he'd seen them, he says no. But despite that, they have a good little trip. They have an interesting conversation. They talk about the nightlife in New York City, where they're from, what they're doing, those kinds of things. Typical small talk, I guess you'd have it. But at the end of that fare, everyone gets out except this blonde young man. And he asks Gene, he says, "What's it like being a taxi driver in New York City?" So Gene thinks about how he can answer that question the best, and tells him a little bit about it without being too descriptive, knowing that they've got to go their separate ways. And then this young man asks him, "What's the best tip you've ever gotten?" Gene thinks about that for a moment, and he says, "It was Johnny McEnroe, tennis player. He doubled the meter. That's the best I've gotten." So this blonde young man responds to that and says, "Well, I'm going to triple the meter. And that way, years down the road, when next time someone asks you what's the best tip you've ever gotten, you can tell them who it was." The next year, Gene found out that this young man was a young Leonardo DiCaprio. Interesting story. So, why do people use taxis? Let's list a few of those reasons. Okay? First, they are from out of town. Second, they're going out of town. Third, maybe they don't have transportation at all. And this is what they do. Or the transportation they have is currently unavailable for whatever reason. Now, those reasons are the same everywhere you go, whether it's here in Rexburg or in New York City. And albeit a bit different, how things work, but what is your goal as a taxi driver, whether you're in New York or here in Rexburg? You'd say the overall goal is to earn a living, to make some money. That's why you drive. Otherwise, why are you sitting out there taking people places? And I would agree. But if you take it on a smaller scale to a day-to-day reason of what is your goal as a taxi driver, I would respond and say that your goal as a taxi driver is to get people in your cab, to be able to drive people around so you can eventually get this money. Now, Rexburg is a special place compared to, places like New York. We don't really have people hailing cabs from the side of the road. This isn't a huge metropolitan area where people use that as a preferred form of transportation all the time. But the principles that we're going to talk about apply not only to a busy metropolitan area like New York City, but even here in Rexburg, where rather than hailing you on the street corners, they're calling you and setting up appointments to be picked up, or those kinds of things. So, how can we get people to get into our cabs, knowing that here in Rexburg, in this area, you're going to have people have to request and call in or email or whatever so that you can get to them and get them where they need to go? Well, it's all about driver-passenger compatibility. And by compatibility, I don't mean that you hit it off or anything like that. I mean how you interact, your interaction between the interaction between the passenger and the driver, and all that goes in with that relationship. So, how do you think that they view you? Do they view you as a crazy person? Disgruntled, grumpy, would rather be doing anything else than driving them wherever they need to be? Or do they see you as a professional providing a service, a positive attitude, and someone who enjoys what they do? Okay, think about that. How do you present yourself to them? Now, just as important, but less controllable, on the other side is, how do you perceive your passengers? Do you just see them as an end goal to make that money, and so you just leave them in the back to do their own thing and not worry about anything, try to avoid conversation, see them as just means to an end, I guess? Or do you see them as interesting people to get to know, new acquaintances, the opportunity to hear new stories and to share some interesting things, learn about a person's life in the simplest way, in that short drive, in that short time that you have together? Okay? And I guarantee you, as you present yourself in that light, in a way that's going to be professional and happy, you're going to see that things are going to improve. Okay? You're going to enjoy your conversations. They're going to be happy. They're going to enjoy it. And they are going to be very interested in return business and coming back for whenever they need your services. They're going to remember that positive experience. Whether you talked about the weather or you talked about where you're from, maybe you find out you're from the same state or whatever. You talk about movies, you talk about books. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. Just as long as you bring that positive, friendly attitude, more often than not, they're going to respond to it and they're going to be just as happy to reciprocate. And as you do that, they're going to, by word of mouth, increase the amount of people that want to use your taxis. So here at Taxi Gringo, as you apply that principle of developing that relationship between a passenger and a driver, you're going to find that it is going to increase the amount of people that use your taxis and the positive feelings that they have towards your business. And it's just going to be beneficial to both sides. Now let's go back to Gene. Gene he's been a successful cab driver for so long. And that's because he's implemented these things. And so I guarantee you, as you put yourself in a mindset like Gene, and you view things as interesting stories to be shared, and entertainment, and all those things, and you take it as it is day by day, you're going to find a lot more entertainment and enjoyment not only in your work, but you're going to get a lot more people who enjoy coming back for return service, and your business is going to just improve and grow. Thank you.